everyone, and welcome to Office Hours. I'm Linda Hammes, co-founder of Tertulia and your host for our Friday series of author panels, guest speakers, demos. And today's session, we will be talking about book metadata. Metadata is your book's DNA, it's your book's fingerprints, it's your book's passport to travel the internet. It's not just the field you fill out when you're distractedly doing your administrative work, uploading your book. It is not just for librarians, nor fodder for algorithms. It is always working for you behind the scenes to help your book get discovered by. With that introduction, I will announce that we are joined by a major industry expert in book metadata today. Joshua serves as Director of Sales and Education at Firebrand Technologies, where he helps publishers solve workflow and metadata challenges. He is a very sought-after person when it comes to this topic, so we're very thankful he could take time to talk to us today. Hi, Joshua.
Hi, good to see you.
Thank you for being here. We're going to open it up with brass tacks, as my mother would say. For the authors on this call who know metadata is important and they'd heard us talk about the importance of metadata, what is it really? What information counts as metadata? Enlighten us.
Sure. Yeah, so metadata is the data about your book. If you think about it, most people obviously think, okay, book description, maybe an author bio, keywords if you're kind of familiar with more of the kind of in the middle of things kind of metadata. But if you think about it, your book cover is metadata. The price of your book, where your book is available, who your book is for, what kind of people you're expecting to read the book, the audience in the book. All of those types of details about your book are metadata. And while we focus on some things more than others, having the core metadata is a really important element of any kind of book publishing venture, whether you're selling yourself on your own website, whether you're selling on major retailers, having good, high quality metadata is extremely important.
Thank you. Okay. If it's so important, who is the architect of that metadata? If you can enlighten us behind the scenes at a traditional publisher, and then how much of an impact does the author usually have on that process?
So at traditional publishing houses, it depends a little bit on how big they are. Some publishers, if you're talking about the big five, obviously they've got entire teams that manage product data, manage metadata in different ways. But if you look at smaller houses, it may be one person or it may be spread across the teams. Typically, metadata is actually the responsibility of everybody from the beginning to the end, from the author to the editors to the production people to the marketing people. Everyone has some sort of piece of the metadata that they're going to be responsible for, or they have some sort of input that they need to give into that data. So for example, an author who comes up with the idea for a book, you're already putting together, some sort of book proposal or some sort of, general idea of what the book is going to be about. That proposal is technically metadata because that's the beginning of things like a book description. That's the beginning of things like keywords because you're starting the process of describing the book. It is considered, in a sense, metadata. So that process then gets refined. That data gets refined as it goes through the editorial process, and the people on the publishing team who are really knowledgeable about how books work and how marketing works and how metadata works are going to be taking that data and really massaging and adapting it. If you get into the production process, some of the metadata that we send out to retailers is things like the trim size, the page count, what type of paper it's printed on, what kind of ink it uses. Those are the kinds of things also that matter to the supply chain, to the retailers and everybody else. So it's very important for the production people to be involved in the creation of metadata. And then on the marketing side, by the time you get to the book is ready to be published, it's coming out next week or 6 months from now, whatever your timeline is. Marketing people are obviously very important because they've been studying how to market books and they know what works and what doesn't, and they're keeping up on trends and they're watching for issues. So they're going to be very involved in that process. And then after publication, you still have a continued need for metadata to be updated over time. Books don't just sell the week after publication, they sell for years afterwards, potentially, based on kind of the concept of the long tail, where you might sell a lot more in the first couple of years, but you're going to have, sales over time as well. And so metadata updates over time are also important. And that's where some bigger publishers will have a whole team that just deals with backlist metadata, data on updates on books that are, 2 years old or 3 years old or older. And some publishers don't have that kind of team, but the marketing team will handle that kind of process. They're watching for, okay, do we need to change the price on that book? Is there a change in maybe we're going to come out with a new edition? So that's a brand new book. We're going to do marketing for that and change the metadata. Or it might just be, well, we're going to get it reprinted. Let's go back and make sure the author bio is up to date. And that's where they might come back to the author and say, hey, what have you done recently? Have you written another book we need to put in your bio? Have you had a change in your career? Is there something different? So that whole process, if you think of metadata, it's not just one and done. It is everybody on the team or everybody connected to the person writing the book. All of the people involved in any way kind of watching and changing and tweaking over time to make sure the book is successful.
We invite advanced questions to these sessions, and we had a traditionally published author write in and say, is this really going to be relevant to me? Yes, the answer is 1000%.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we understand this takes a, army of different people whose, fingerprints are on the book. You mentioned how important it is that the metadata evolves over time. Where physically is it, and how do those updates happen?
So for let's talk about the two different kind of approaches we're talking about, traditional publishing and self-published authors. Traditional publishing publishers will have some sort of database typically where they manage their product data, their metadata in that database. And then that data in the database is then packaged up and sent out to retailers on some sort of schedule, typically, a couple every day or every week or something like that. Retailers will be expecting to receive any new metadata for new books or any updated data for other books that have already been out. If you've ever heard of Onyx, Onyx is the format where that data flows. It's not the database format. It's actually kind of like a Word doc in a sense, although it's different format of document. But that's the format that you deliver the data in to the retailer. Then the retailer takes that data out of that Onyx format. They read that data and they put it into their database for their web store or their retail store, whatever else. So that's a traditional publishing flow, is going from the publisher's database out to the retailers and then wherever it needs to go from there. For authors that are self-published, you're basically doing that by putting your data directly into the retailer. You might have some Word document, you keep your product data, your metadata in right now, or a Google Doc or spreadsheet or something like that. But what you do by going into Ingram Spark or KDP or any other retail platform and putting your product data into that system is you're sidestepping the whole publisher kind of have a database and push through Onyx. You're kind of doing that part yourself. You have your own kind of storage mechanism for your data, and you're acting as Onyx by going and filling in the form on the website on Ingram or whatever. That metadata then lives in the retail store. Now, this is where it gets really important, because what the retailers do with the data is going to be, variant. It's going to vary depending on kind of how they handle data on their stores and what their search mechanisms are. We can talk more about that later, but yeah, it's going to be very important to make sure that the data you're providing to the retailers or through Ingram Spark or KDP or whatever that you're providing is good quality metadata, because what they're going to do with it is going to be dependent on what they're doing. You want to give them the best quality data you can. So even if they don't do a great job with everything you give them, they'll do a good job with the stuff you do give them.
Yeah, that's really relevant to the side of the work that I do as a bookseller. For instance, we have a TikTok shop, and you know how
Yep.
difficult it is to jam the metadata that's traditionally sent to retailers into a TikTok shop and update it regularly. Not easy. So I'm really familiar with that challenge of, even if you get good data, how you're presenting it to readers. Let's say that I've written a book and something wonderful happens and I get a great review. Or there's breaking news on the topic that I've written about, and it's really quite relevant to readers. How fast should I try to push out those changes, and what would that process look like to update both traditional and indie?
So depending on what you're trying to do to your data to update and kind of address the topic that's, that's trending, you can add different keywords to your data. You can add, maybe something to your book description or your author bio if it's something, as seen on the Today Show or something, because you got a spot on the Today Show or something. That kind of stuff is something you could very easily do either as an author or as a publisher just by going to where your metadata is managed, updating the product data there and sending it out to the retailers. So again, that same process occurs. If I wanted to update my product page on Amazon and I'm a traditional publisher, I'm going to go into my database, make the changes that I need to make, and make sure that data gets pushed out to Amazon or whoever else. If you're a traditional independent author, then you're going to go to Ingram Spark or KDP or whatever, and you're going to make the change there. Typically, changes that go into those systems are out and visible within a couple of days on most retailers. So it's a fairly fast turnaround to see that data show up typically. There might be some differences on different retailers and whatever, but that's pretty straightforward. But I will also make the point that just because you updated the metadata doesn't mean that the search engines that behind the scenes kind of doing this stuff are necessarily going to be surfacing your book more, depending on how things work. And so I would always caution someone against saying, making that change, I was on the Today Show to my author bio, making that change will automatically make the book more visible. Not necessarily. This is where the marketing and advertising you do has to go hand in hand with the metadata changes you're doing, because metadata only takes you so far. You still have to do advertising. You still have to do marketing. Go out on your social media and point to the same thing and make sure, hey, this big thing is occurring in the world. I wrote a book that's exactly on that topic. Well, that's where your marketing is going to make a bigger impact than just changing some product data on the book. But don't leave the product data out, right? Make sure it's part of that process as well.
If you think of the traditional marketing funnel and you've actually consider a buyer who you've marketed to, maybe through a podcast or whatever it is, blog post, and they get to your actual product page, it's the signals, it's those sort of conversion facing data
Mm-hmm.
points that really can make a difference to signal this book is important. This
Yeah.
person is credible.
Yeah. And I would
Um,
also say too, I see a lot of authors over my career. I've done a lot of consulting with authors. Once you've written one book, that doesn't mean that that book is the book that you've written and that's all you're ever going to do too. Because you wrote a topic on that book, that's great. Come out with the next book. What's the next thing that you can publish on that topic or on a different topic? So you broaden your reach and you're not just hyper focused on just the one book. A lot of publishers, a lot of authors get caught up in this idea that I wrote a book about this topic. I'm going to keep on editing and updating that book and constantly updating that book instead of saying I'm going to write a new book about the same topic that takes it to the next level or that addresses another issue related to it. This is where traditional publishing does it pretty well. They understand that, the book that I published, it has a long tail, but once it's published, and I should move on to the next thing that's going to impact the market or the people that want to read the book, the audience, in a different way or in a better way or in talking about a different aspect of the same topic. That's kind of an important distinction to make here too. Yeah, update your metadata. Yes, keep your data up to date over time, but don't try to make that book be the only book that you ever write on the topic, because that could be detrimental to you as an author and your visibility if you only ever have the one book and just keep on.
lives. Could you walk us through a bit about search? Let's focus particularly on maybe Google and a little bit on the answer engines and ChatGPT. So say hi.
Yeah. So let's break this down a little bit. One thing is let's focus just on regular search indexing, the old school SEO method, and then let's also build on that and talk about AI search and how that is affecting searches right now. Um, because metadata has different requirements in the new world of AI search than it did in the past. So talking about how search engines generally work, Google, Bing, whatever kind of general search engines are out there, what they do is they go out and they index the internet. They go to your website where you're selling your book and they slurp up all the data about your book that's on that page, and they try to index it based on what data you give them. This is where having keywords on the page, sure, that's good. Having a book description on the page, that can be helpful. But it's also, they're looking at a lot of other indicators as to the trust and the authority and the quality of that content. If your website stands alone and nobody ever links to it from anywhere, then your website is not going to be considered a trustworthy authority on whatever the topic is of your book. The more people that point to your website and say, hey, Linda's done a really good job talking about this topic. I want you to go buy her book. The more that kind of linking happens from other places on the internet, the higher your ranking in the search engines is going to be. That's especially true on Google because they really like having those links coming in showing authority. It's also, if you think about it, this is why things like Wikipedia get high authority. It's not only that it's free information and it's really broadly available, it's because people point to it and people know that it's supposedly a trusted resource. We won't talk about whether it is or not. But that's the point when it comes to indexing. Standard search engines go out and just collect data. What's happening now and the way AI is changing search is powerful and gives an opportunity for authors that maybe you didn't have before if you focus on doing the things that you need to do to build out your website or build out your visibility more. Now, a couple of things to remember. AI search engines like ChatGPT or Google Gemini or Perplexity or whatever, all of them are doing the same type of indexing that search engines have been doing for a long time. They're still going out and scraping the internet for lots of data. But what they do that's different is they're not just looking for words on the page. Typical search engines in the past would look and see, do you have that keyword? And then it would index your page for that keyword, and then they would, that important word, and then they would, return that as a result. New search engine, AI search tools are trying to understand the content of your website. They're looking for sentiment. They're looking for information that answers questions. And so the kinds of metadata that you want to provide to your website now are different. And the way you structure that data is very different as well. In the past, it would just be HTML. I'm putting a book description and a paragraph on my website, no big deal. But now what the search engines are looking for is, because people are asking questions, they're looking for answers to questions. And the more you can give them those answers in packaged form, the easier it is for them to answer the question, then the easier it is for them as well to point to your website and say, Linda's the expert on this because she has the answer to that question. I'm going to use her answer and point to her website as the source of that answer. That's what you want as a seller of any product, is you want the search engines to see you as the party that knows the answer to that question and therefore pointing to your product. So this is where things like FAQs on your website, frequently asked questions, having that on product pages can be very helpful for search engines to see what's going on. Also, behind the scenes, there's now coding that you can do on websites that's been around for a long time, but we're starting to see it really become important with AI search, called schema.org. Schema.org is a standard in the world of the internet that structures data behind the scenes and visible to the consumer on the web page in a way that search engines can understand and parse out properly. So there are structured ways of doing product data, and specifically book product data, using schema.org information. Now, we're getting into the weeds here, I know a lot, but we're talking about book information being structured on the page, hidden to the consumer, but visible to the search engine, where it can see this is a book product page. This book has this ISBN. It's at this price point. You can purchase it here. It's the book description. What's the author? All of that information that we send out through Onyx, or that you go fill out in a form on Ingram Spark or whatever, that same metadata is now available in structured form, hidden to the consumer, but visible to that search engine. And they really like that because search engines are looking for that kind of consumable data. So my recommendation for anyone who controls their own website, whether it's an e-commerce store or not, even if it's just a regular website, make sure that your system, whatever you're using, WordPress or Shopify or whatever, make sure that you have it set up to do schema.org information on your product pages and on other pages on your website, so that it's structured in a way that the AI search engines can understand. And add those FAQs, add lots of information. This is where, with AI search, the AI engines want to get as much data as they can because they're trying to understand the content. They're not just looking for words in a description that might be interesting. They're trying to understand what the description says. And they're looking for sentiment. How will someone feel if they read this book? What will someone gain from reading this book? So make sure that you have not just a really good, high quality, long book description, but also add a book excerpt, add a table of contents, add your author bio, of course, add other details that you can put on your website that maybe nobody else ever shows. Amazon, Barnes Noble, whoever, they don't necessarily show that kind of data. Expand the amount of data you put on your website. If you've got author videos, put that on your website so that they can have that, and make sure those videos have closed caption turned on, have the closed captioning done, because the transcript that's behind the scenes is going to be read by that AI tool just as much as your book description is. So it makes sense. It's like, it's all of this data that you want to add, but the more data you can provide, the better it is for those AI search tools to then process that data and use it appropriately.
Helpful. The comps, what is your book? How is your book different from others? How is it
Mhm.
differentiated? I think that's like a really interesting thing you don't necessarily see on an Amazon page, which I would recommend.
Yep.
Definitely the question and answer format, even if you put it on a custom page and it's sort of not buried on your site, but in your blog somewhere, just so that it's there and that question. Bowker has many blanks to fill in for assigning an ISBN to a book. I gather these feeds into metadata. Is there a recommended source that explains these various fields beyond what is provided at Bowker? Perhaps something a little more user-friendly or intuitive? Could you take that one?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, most of the data that Bowker's looking for is just basic product data for the book descriptive copy or whatever else. If there are specific fields you're not sure about, then the Book Industry Study Group has documentation available that's intended for traditional publishers, but is just as useful for authors about metadata fields and what best practices you can use around them. There's a document on the BISG website. I'll see if I can pull up a link and drop it in chat. But there's a really good information document about metadata fields that will probably answer some of the questions you're running into as you fill out that Bowker data. And
Oh, that'd be
recognize
great.
as well, Bowker, their books and print data is utilized by a lot of other sources. They sell that data, and they sell it to book discovery engines, and they sell it to retailers and everybody else. So make sure that whatever data you put in there is actually correct and good quality, because it will get spread further than just Bowker itself.
Thank you. That's great. Scarlett in the chat says she adds metadata to Bowker and distributors and has one doc with all the possible fields. That's a good way to do it.
Yep.
Rebecca asks, is there a way to manually insert metadata on my Tertulia website just to make this real for y'all who most of people on this call are using Tertulia? Or does it have to populate from the publisher? So we are not pushing updates to your site. We are pulling it in the initial import. If you are making changes to your metadata, we are not automatically updating that. And I think many of you have metadata plus on your sites that you maybe don't even have at Ingram Spark or other places. So I think that's just an important note that you should think about the opportunity as Joshua is describing to look for keyword-rich content, Q&A content, video with captions, all of that stuff to have on your site too.
And that's a good thing to put up on YouTube and then link it into your site. The linking also can help because you
Yeah,
want that. Again, you want your website not just to be standalone. And YouTube
links
is
out.
one of the biggest search engines on the planet. So having good quality videos on YouTube, having those be closed captioned with transcripts on YouTube, that's a really great way to make sure you have broader coverage in the internet than just your website.
Retailers, what challenges, uh, pitfalls, or opportunities are there to regularly update those and not just Amazon? But for somebody who's committed to being wide for the wind, so to speak, what do you see that process looking like, especially for an indie author?
Yeah, if you have direct connection, of course, if you have a login of some kind to whatever the retailer is, then going in every once in a while. My recommendation, just broadly for metadata updates, is every 6 months or so, you want to go in and tweak and adjust and make sure it's done. More frequently for better selling titles. So every 6 weeks, maybe you want to tweak your keywords and see if you can get a little bump. Sometimes retailers, especially Amazon, will benefit you by kind of recycling your book in their discovery feeds if you're making good changes to your metadata. So it's a good idea to make changes and tweaks periodically. Again, this would be for your front list titles, the titles that you're focused on right now because you just published them or they've been out for a couple of years, so they're your best sellers. Older titles, maybe once a year, going back and tweaking the metadata should be fine. If you have a lot of titles, then obviously it becomes harder to do it more frequently. But when you go into those retail stores and and sites and you fill out a form, that's the place you want to go back to later to tweak and update. Ingram is really, really important for this purpose, and so is Bowker, because both Ingram and Bowker's data get fed to a bunch of other places on the internet. So if you're not using Ingram Spark, but you have access to putting your book data into Ingram in some other way, to make sure the book data in Ingram is up to date. If you're using Ingram Spark, make sure that is up to date. That's very, very important because their data is they're the 20 million pound gorilla in publishing. Their data is distributed everywhere, including to Amazon. So it will impact your visible data out in the marketplace. But remember as well that, as you're growing as a publisher, if you are an indie publisher and you're starting to publish other people's books and you're starting to really kind of grow into a publishing venture, remember that direct connections to these retailers is the gold standard. If you can go out and get a publisher agreement signed with a retailer, that's going to make a bigger difference in your ability to feed them your own data. There's a certain point at which that becomes possible. Typically, you have to be a certain size before they start talking to you. But it is when you get to that size, you definitely want to do it directly. Before that, Bowker, Ingram, Amazon, those are obviously the key places to make sure your data is up to date. And then try to go and check the other stores where people are buying your book and see if there's anything wrong. And if so, see how they're try to figure out how they're getting their data, maybe from Ingram, and just make sure it's up to date through that.
We've talked about distributors, obviously making sure your Ingram Spark page is up to date. If you're in expanded distribution, that's going to be important. What about book chain? How are they utilizing metadata? If you're an indie author, it can be extraordinarily hard to get your book. For any author, it can be hard to get your book visibility in these stores. What role does metadata play at that level?
Metadata for indie bookstores plays a huge role because a couple of things. First of all, the book buyer, the person at that bookstore who buys books to put on the shelves, that book buyer is going to be looking at data to determine whether or not they want that book. Sometimes they purchase based on, regionality. This is a local author who wrote about a local issue. That's a great reason to have it on a local bookstore. But if you're selling a more, kind of a novel or something that isn't that way, and you're just trying to get into as many indie bookstores as you can, understanding how they see and how they buy books is going to be the most important step because they're looking at your product data one way or the other. More than likely, they are using tools like Edelweiss or Ingram's catalog to be able to purchase books, to figure out which books to purchase. So making sure that your books are active in Ingram's catalog, that you have them up there and available where indie bookstores will see them. And also, if you can get into Edelweiss as well, those are really important ways to ensure that your books are being visible to those book buyers. Now, it doesn't mean they will be, or they'll see your book automatically, because it may depend on how they're searching for titles in those systems or what kind of catalogs they're using within those systems. So there's other things you can do again as you take on a more of an indie publisher approach and not just an indie author approach. Then you'll find that you need to get an account at Edelweiss and actually have your own catalog in Edelweiss, and then you'll have sales reps or yourself going and talking to book buyers and saying, "Hey, I've got this catalog of books. I would love for you to take a look at it." That's where you get into potentially getting a traditional distributor, IPG, or it's one of the other distributors that's out there, and getting traditional distribution because they then have the access to those bookstores with sales reps that go in and sit down with bookstore buyers and tell them what's coming out from our publishers in the next 6 months or the next year.
So
That's where
you
you can expand on that. Yeah.
so you do see independent authors going in and into Edelweiss themselves,
You can
setting
if you
up
go
accounts.
through the right kind of accounts. IBPA, the Independent Book Publishers Association, they have discounts for members that are for Edelweiss and things like that. So there are ways to do that as well. The real key is making sure that you can get access depending on the type of publisher you are, the type of author you are, and sometimes there's limitations like that.
I think the region thing that always comes up with indie authors too. I
Yep.
mean, has huge impact if you can make that really visible with your book. I often see, over the years, friends of mine in my neighborhood, local authors, and their books keep showing up on library shelves. And I think, and they're surprised. I take a picture and I send it to them, and they're delighted. Well, it didn't happen because they asked. It happened
Yep.
because of their metadata. Actually talk to us about libraries for anything further to say different from retailers about that.
Yeah, libraries are in many ways the same as a book buyer at a bookstore. The librarian is going to be looking for books that are interesting to their readers. So they're looking for local content. They're looking for important topics. They're looking for, things that are going to be, useful and helpful. And they have limited shelf space. And once it's there, it typically sticks around unless it can't get nobody ever checks it out. So they're going to be a little more picky about which books they put on those shelves. That's again where that regionality can be really helpful going into a library and saying, I'm a local author and I published this book about this local issue. That might be a helpful way. But again, they're buying their books in much the same way that bookstores are. They're looking for products in the catalogs that are available, especially the big ones like Ingram and Edelweiss, and they're finding which books are popular and which books they think are going to be most requested by their consumers.
Impact?
Yeah, I think if you have good quality data from the beginning, you'll have a better impact on your book long term. So just making sure you have the foundational metadata elements is really important. But for changing data, tweaking data in the future, book descriptions, author bios, BISAC codes or subject codes, and keywords are really the four main areas that have the biggest impact on sales. I'll give a caveat to that in a minute, but let's talk about all four of those. A book description needs to be good quality, long form content. It can't be just one little paragraph. You need to have multiple paragraphs of information. I would recommend, if you can, put a bulleted list in there because bulleted lists are seen as that's information that a search engine's going to want to, read out the bullets and say, oh, that's interesting. Especially for nonfiction content, you want a bulleted list of, topics the book covers or things you'll learn in this book or things like that. So book description should be longer than you might think. It should definitely be more than just one little paragraph. In addition to that, I would recommend tweaking and updating it periodically because you want to make sure it's kept up to date with changing things. Again, this is a good opportunity for some big news story comes up, some big thing going on in the world. If it's related to the content of your book, I wrote a book that's similar or in that same kind of vein. Make sure that it's, don't mention necessarily the news event, but make sure you have words in your book description that help people see the relationship to that thing that is going on in the world. That might be helpful. This is where keywords become really important as well. Keywords are really important, especially on Amazon. Amazon utilizes keywords in their book search almost exclusively. It's basically keywords and author and title that are what are being indexed in the book search on Amazon. So you want to have really good high quality keywords. When you're thinking about your keywords, don't worry as much on Amazon, especially about the phrases that you give. Think more about the words that you're providing. Phrases are helpful and they're important, but don't go overboard thinking about, historical nonfiction for women or something like that as a keyword, right? That's not nearly as helpful as the word historical or the word, women or something like that. Because from Amazon's perspective, they don't even care what phrase you give them. They're going to be looking at all the different words and mixing and matching them, doing what we call derived keywords. They're going to be deriving different keywords from the words you're providing. So think about it from the content of the book perspective. This is where I would highly recommend that the author not be the only person making keywords for their book. If you have anybody else helping you edit your book, proofread your book, or whatever, ask them to come up with a list of keywords for you as well, just so you can see what do they think the book is about? What kind of words would they use to describe the book? Don't just describe it yourself. Get help from other people to help describe it and use that language in your keywords and in your book description. This is especially true when it comes to understanding your audience. Go look at your reviews for your book and say, what are people saying about my book? They're probably using words that I would never use. I'm saying noir fiction. They're saying it's a police story or a cop story or something like that. what is the language of your audience? Use that in your keywords and in your book description as you're tweaking and adjusting. And go back again 6 months from now and again look at the newer reviews and say, what are they saying about it now? We actually helped a publisher with this one time. They were trying to figure out how their books would sell if they tweaked their keywords, and they were trying to figure that stuff out. And they found out after going and looking at the audience reviews, at the reviews for their books. They're a publisher of nonfiction content, and all the books are written as guides for teachers about how to deal with children with autism and other developmental disorders. And they were very surprised to find out that the majority of people writing reviews were actually parents who were reading this very technical book about how to teach children with these disorders. And so they started changing their keywords in their book description to include not just teachers, but also parents in the language they were using and using that audience language. And they saw a bump in sales because they were now addressing the audience itself. This is the kind of thing you want to think about. What's the audience of my book, and what keywords and book descriptive copy can I write that are going to bring more of those people in, right? That's going to help them see that this book is for them. Subject categories, very important. Make sure your subject categories are correct. Sometimes they change. Amazon changes their what they call browse nodes or their categories all the time. So make sure that if your book gets moved around, is it in the right category for the book? But also the primary category you provide, the number one category you provide is really important because it really should match what the book is actually about. Also, don't mix and match categories. A book is either fiction or nonfiction. It's either adult or young adult or juvenile. It's not all of that, right? You need to be careful about not trying to mix and match across different category types. In addition, change your categories periodically. Don't just stick with one category forever or three categories forever. The main category will probably stay pretty stable, but that second or third category you provide, you might tweak it every once in a while. Go look at your comp titles and say, what are my comp titles and what categories are they using? My book's similar. I'm going to see if I can rank well in that category. So move it into a different category periodically if you can. And then author bios, pretty straightforward. Keep it up to date. Make sure if you get a new award or something like that, it's always being updated as well. Now, this is where I'm gonna focus a little bit on Amazon too, because I said these four things: the book description, keywords, author bio, and BISAC codes or subject codes. Those are really, really important. On Amazon, A plus is also very important because Amazon has a very unique role here of trying to help consumers find what they want to find. They've expanded on what you normally provide in metadata, especially through Onyx if you're a traditional publisher. And they're using A plus as a way for you as an author or you as a publisher to provide more information about your book, including images that are going to draw the consumer in. This is really important for conversion on Amazon. Amazon actually says that they increase the visibility of products that have A plus. They will give it higher ranking because they know A plus sells. But also they know for a fact that there's a 14% bump in sales on Amazon for titles that have A plus. So you want to have that increase and you want to take advantage of that. Make sure that you have at least something in your A plus, even if it's just a banner. You can make this in Canva. It can be made very easily. You don't have to go through a lot of effort to build something really complex, but having something in A plus is really helpful just for visibility and searchability of your titles. And again, make sure it's beautiful and visual if you can. Have your designer who did your book cover, have them do the same work for you. Have your marketing agency or whoever that you're doing marketing with, have them do it for you. Make sure that it's a good quality A plus image. I will also say if you're able to put additional product images into a retail store, additional product images are also really helpful for this purpose. They make your book more visible. They help consumers. There was an MIT study that was done a couple of years ago, and they said that any product that was on this is an eBay study. MIT study said we make a decision on images in less than a second. It's like 0.2 milliseconds or something. We make a decision on whether we like something based on the image. So your cover image really needs to look nice in order for people to like it. But what the eBay study showed is that they showed that product records on eBay that had more than one product photo sold I can't remember the number. It was a huge amount more than products that only had one. Amazon knows this. This is why they try to have you add more images. But every retailer wants those images when they can get them. So get those extra marketing images of the book sitting on a table or in context of something or someone reading it or whatever. Those are things that are kind of helpful for, again, visualization of the product in the minds of the people. Keywords are hidden to the consumer, so that's not a big deal. Amazon and Ingram Spark, especially if you're just on KDP, they're going to limit the number of keywords you can provide anyway because they don't want you to overwhelm them. So there's going to be those limitations. I would max out the limitations. Those 7 keyword fields. Don't just write a phrase in each one of them. Go ahead and put a lot of words in each of those fields. Take advantage of the space they give you. But because they're hidden to a consumer, keywords are not a problem. I will say be very careful about trying to take your keywords and stuff them in places they don't belong. Keywords don't belong in the subtitle of a book. You shouldn't say, bestseller for mom, Mother's Day or Father's Day, right? That kind of stuff in the subtitle of the book, that can actually cause problems in the marketplace where that data then flows into libraries and they don't know that's not the title of the book. That's not actually on the title page of the book. If it's not on the title page, it shouldn't go in the title fields. And also stuffing keywords in your book description can be problematic as well if it doesn't flow naturally or feel appropriate. So just make sure when you're writing the description, you're not just throwing in a word just for, to try to get it to be ranked for that word in the keywords. Make sure it makes sense and it feels well. But yeah, as far as keywords are concerned, maximize the number of keywords you can. Amazon technically says on the traditional publishing side, they say they have a limit of 250 characters, but it's not always that clear if they're enforcing that rule. So I would say just provide as many as you can within the boundaries that they give you, whoever that, whatever that feeding system is. On your own website, keywords are great, but keywords are not nearly as important because we tried for a long time. A lot of websites tried for a long time to hack the search engine optimization by just adding a bunch of keywords on the page, and the search engines got really smart about that. So it's not really nearly as helpful as the descriptive copy that you provide and that schema.org kind of structured data behind the scenes that you're providing as well.
Yeah, when people write and they say, "Well, where can I put my keywords and my, SEO content on the sites?" I say, "Well, we already have the sites engineered to be as SEO as they can be
Mhm.
without short of content. Where you want to focus is on inbound and outbound links, sharing
Yes.
rich content, getting people coming back, being helpful."
Yes. Yes.
We have two questions from two Scots in the chat. One Scott asks, should keywords be separated by commas?
It depends on the system you're putting them into. Typically in Onyx, they're separated by semicolons. On most retail platforms, like if you're filling it out on Ingram Spark or KDP, you don't have to use commas. You could just put in words and it's going to be effective. But commas are helpful for differentiating phrases. If I have a phrase I'm trying to get across, Japanese cooking, okay, Japanese cookbook, I'm gonna say Japanese cookbook as a keyword, comma something else. That makes sense in that context. But look at the requirements of the system you're putting the data in, because that's going to be the most important thing. It may be they're looking for a comma. It may be they're looking for a semicolon. It may be they don't want any of it. So just know the system and look at their best practices.
Comma as separators. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
The other Scott asks, is there a way to determine the metadata of comp titles, i.e., subject categories, keywords, etc.?
Yeah, go look at them on Amazon or wherever else you're comparing them. If you go look at, you can't see keywords because that's all hidden in the database behind the scenes, but you can obviously see their book description and their author bio and those kinds of things. The categories that they're on are going to be visible on the Amazon product
Mhm.
page. You can also do searches if you have access to systems like BookScan, then BookScan has a lot more data about books, especially they'll even have sales data for comp titles. So BookScan is probably not available to independent authors as much, but if you're an indie publisher, you can potentially get a BookScan account. But BookScan is really great for that. Publisher Rocket is another good tool for that purpose. So looking at comp titles and trying to see what they're selling, how they're positioning themselves and in the marketplace. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Diane mentioned that in the chat too. Thank you, Diane. Lots of helpful comments here. Two more. Scarlett asks, I wonder if I only have a book on Ingram, not on KDP, but on Amazon, can I have A plus content? Okay, and Joanne asked the same question. So I guess what
So you're only
enables you to
going to get
have A
Ingram
plus content
Spark.
or not?
I'm not sure if Amazon would, yeah, that's a great question for Ingram Spark, honestly, because that would be a question for their systems if they have some way of, some suggestions for how to do that. I think I think you can still get a KDP account connected to your personal Amazon account, and claim the book in KDP. I think you can still do that. And then if you do have the book, then if you claim the book, then I think you can put A plus content on it. I'm not sure about that, so I don't want to say that's the answer, but I would say talk to Ingram and look at their
Well, in the cases
documentation.
like Scarlett, she may already have the account, and this book is on
Right.
Amazon, and that
If it's
one's
being distributed through Ingram Spark to Amazon, yeah, if it's going that route, it's not in her KDP account because she doesn't have a KDP
got it.
account. Then she may be able to create a KDP account and um, go and claim the book and say, "Oh, this is my book," to Amazon, which would then give her access to go create A plus content.
Thank you, Joshua.
It's
I'll
on.
try. That's a great way of going around it. I appreciate it. Thanks.
And if it
Scarlett, do you
doesn't
want to
work, let me
follow
know.
up on that at all? I should have invited you up here.
Oh, no, really great information. I have Publisher Rocker, so I thought it was really great that what I'm taking away, Joshua, is the frequency with which I'm supposed to update my metadata. I really haven't been doing that. And I've only recently realized that I should complete the metadata on Bowker as well because for my latest book, I'm distributing it as well through Book Vault. And I was curious because from the time I put in the ISBN in Book Vault, it automatically fed a lot of the information in, and I realized it's coming from Bowker.
Yeah.
And so
Wow.
that really valuable to learn. Um, and I think a lot of indie bookstores, depending on how they get the book, may get that automatically. So that was really fabulous. But yeah, you captured it exactly right, Linda. I have one title that my latest book actually that I distribute through Ingram Spark. I do not have it on KDP, but of course it shows up on Amazon. And I just haven't been able to, I didn't know that I could, but I understand what you're saying. It's actually signing for perhaps for an ad account, KDP, I should, or through Amazon, and I should be able to get A plus content. I'll see, because people put products there all the time. It
Yeah.
doesn't, right? So
There's
all
got to be a
kinds
way
of
to do it. I've never done it
products.
myself.
BSAC should be.
Yeah, BISAC codes should be the first code should always be the thing that best describes the book. So in that situation, it's
Don't
self-help.
game it.
Don't game it. You can game the second and third categories, but the primary category is the one that people are going to be expecting to see it in, right? A cultural history, if I go to a cultural history category and I see a book about anger management or whatever, or emotions or whatever, I'm not going to think that's cultural history. It's going to stand out in a bad way among the other books that are in that primary category. That doesn't mean you can't put it in subcategories that are interesting or connected in some way. But my recommendation for BISAC is typically keep it as close to the content of the book as you can, but especially that very first category, that top category that you really want to rank in, that's the one that should be there. And BISAC categories change every year. So every year in December, the Book Industry Study Group, I'm on the board of BISG. The Book Industry Study Group comes out with updates every December for BISAC codes. And those BISAC codes then get fed into and get used by different retailers. And so they'll tweak and change. So every, January or February, make sure you go and see what changed on the retail stores. Do I have it? Go look at the list of BISAC codes and say which ones are new this year. There might be a new category that your book fits into better because, publishers have been kind of working on expanding that list. They also sometimes they change dramatically. A couple of years back, there was a big change where we added an entire young adult section, right? We basically replicated a lot of the juvenile and broke out juvenile and young adult from each other. That's a big change. Now you have an entire BISAC category structure that's just for young adult books. But we do the same thing all the time for other things. Indigenous works have been getting a lot of focus and attention in the last couple of years and other things like that. So as new codes come out, then retailers will adapt and they'll start using them. So make sure you go through that process as well.
That's so interesting about young adult. It makes sense. It's like a
Mhm.
really dramatic example of something that has like this huge marketing impact, and you've got like a category that's just growing and booming, and you want to
Yeah.
be categorized as such. So
And
makes
I
a
can
ton of
also,
sense.
sorry, also, this is an important thing too, because Tertulia and because you have so many authors and who are engaged together in kind of this community. If together you all say, you know what, we really need to have a good quality category for this. We can show that there are 10 or 15 or 100 books that are published out in the marketplace that really would benefit from being in this new category that doesn't currently exist in BISAC. You can submit a request to BISG, to the Subject Codes Committee, and give them backing for it and reason for it and say, we think this should be added as a category. And they'll bring you in a representative from your group, whatever, can come in and sit down and give the case, and the committee will vote on it and decide whether to do it. So if you're seeing as a community that we're really lacking certain categories, or we think we need to break this to category into two and whatever, there's an opportunity for you to come together and
People don't remember, you said it very early in this conversation, covers are metadata. Any words about covers in the age of AI, covers in this visual, highly visual world we're living in? Anything you've seen interesting happening or words of caution or wisdom around covers?
don't use AI in images in your covers. If you can completely avoid it, please don't. It's people can see still. I mean, AI is getting much better, but be very careful about it. I always recommend as well for independent authors, get a professional cover designer to design your cover. Don't try to do it yourself. There's a lot of science behind book cover design, color and style and font and artwork. All of that is very, very scientifically backed. And people who are professionals in that industry, they know as a book designer, as a cover designer, what's going to work or not. But also go look at comp titles and see, again, knowing what your competitive titles are in the marketplace, knowing how they look is going to help you determine what's normal in that space. So get a feel for that. But yeah, I think it's really important to make sure you're not utilizing AI for the cover design if you can avoid it. Also, remember that AI work cannot be copyrighted. So if you're using an AI image, some sort of AI generated image, you can't copyright that cover image. So there's the potential issue in the future around that. So just be cautious with it and use.
Anyway, wow, what an incredible crash course. That was so helpful. And you're so generous, Joshua. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
my pleasure.
Really appreciate your time.
Anytime.
Yeah, take care. I think people are going to be rewatching this one. You
Thank
have a
you.
wonderful weekend. And yeah, thanks again. We'll definitely share out those links that he provided and some of this really just incredibly valuable information to you all and package it up.
Have a good July 4th holiday weekend, everybody.
You too, Lanning.
All
See
right.
everybody in 2 weeks. Thanks again, Joshua.
See you then.